Okay.
Two.
We good. We good.
Is this my good side? I don't know.
We good.
You recording?
Yep.
Okay. Can you tell us about yourself and what you've been doing to make Portland a community of benefits?
Okay, so my work tends to be global, okay? And so I work in Portland, and I work in the Pacific Northwest, and I work in North America, and then I work in the rest of the world too. And the work is basically all the same, and that is how do we change the consciousness of people from the type of consciousness that would create war or create conflict of some kind. I shouldn't say conflict, could create armed or dangerous conflict in some way. And changing that to a way that we still have conflict, but we work those conflicts out in such a way that we have or we can foster peace. And so I do that in organizations, and I do that in actual conflict zones, and I do that in zones that are not quite conflicting yet. So that's pretty much how I do that. And I also do a lot of lectures and seminars and trainings and things like that. So I'm leaving here to go to a training, and so I stay busy.
Trainings on what?
Again, to me, the question of peace is a question that sits here. The question that lies underneath peace is, what is the consciousness that we have as human beings that lead to a situation where we either have peace or we have the absence of peace? Okay? And so the sort of challenge is, how do we do that? How do we have a situation where we can get to that lower level of consciousness? So so the work I'm doing, for example, tonight is focusing in on what I call the shadow aspects of our collective society. And if you look at shadow aspects as being, and I'm looking at 4 particular areas. Violence. Why are we such a violent society? Why is violence so prevalent in our minds? Poverty, greed, and hoarding, because these are all related to each other. Okay. The concept of the other, that there's an I here, that this I is separate from a you over there, and that separation allows me to do anything I want to do, and nothing comes back to me. Okay. And then the last one is depression, despair, and suicide. That all of these things are alive and affecting our society, but we don't talk about it. Well, we talk about the surface level of it. So, for example, with the Newtown shootings, we talk about gun control as though that was the issue, and that wasn't the issue. You know, because if the guy didn't have a gun, he'd go after him with knives or go after him with forks. I mean, the issue is, what was the conditions of his consciousness that drove him to that point in the first place? Because if you change the consciousness, you can put somebody in a room full of guns and nothing happens. So that's the piece that I'm looking at working on.
So in your opinion, what do you think about the definition of peace?
It's interesting. It's an interesting question, because I get asked to talk about peace a lot, and in my books I don't write about it. Okay, I don't use the word because it's too much of it's too squishy a word for me. It's people mistake peace for being nice. You know, people think that peace is, I'm just going to smile a lot and I'm going to dream about unicorns and daffodils, etc. When the reality to me of peace is something much deeper and something much more complex. I do talk about nonviolence. I talk about the concept of inclusivity, that I am you. Now, if I am you, unless I am seriously schizophrenic, I'm not going to be violent with you, okay? And so, so I think that in our society, too often, the concept of peace gets perverted to, let's all just be nice to each other. And that, I think, is not doing us a favor. It's not the thing that we should be doing. So, so I try to get at the tougher level of that. And by doing this level here, by looking at consciousness, looking at inclusivity, looking at what nonviolence means, we get to a world that then has peace.
So is that, it sounds very similar to some of our students read, jumping in and I try not to, but some of our students read Long Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela, and this idea of Ubuntu is threaded throughout that. Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yes. Okay, so tonight's adult class will be on the concept of, that I'm calling Pax Humana, okay? What is the peace of human beings, okay? And what would that look like? And we've been looking at issues of nonviolence, security, and freedom. Now, if you can find the right blend of those three factors, then you've got something that I would call peace, okay? But all too often, we begin to mistake peace for nonviolence and forget about the security aspect. You know, there are some bad actors out in the world. Or we focus on security that gives us a sense of no one's going to attack me because I've got all this military around me, but it actually makes you less secure than more secure. And so this is a, I guess you found this out, this is a really complex concept, you know. It's not something that you have to think about it and act on it at a pretty deep level. And I'm not, I unfortunately think that a lot of people don't do that deep work. I was just on a panel in Kansas City there were 4 of us advocating peace, and it's really clear that 3 of us had a very different concept of peace than I did, you know. In one woman's definition, well, it's okay to use military when it's really important, you know, on really important issues. Then it's okay to have what do you call it? The concept is the just war. I don't know if you all talked about that or not.
Obama.
Oh yeah, and way before him, sure. You know. And so, I mean, then this gets into religious connotations because various religions say, "Thou shalt not kill," but we modify that by saying, "Oh, sometimes it's really, really important to kill." Now, what are those times? Whenever I feel like it. Whenever you really piss me off, okay? And so that's why I talk about nonviolence. You know, if you're really talking about nonviolence, then I'm not going to be violent with you, regardless of what you're going to do with me. And that changes the dynamic completely, you know. And that's something that I try to live by so far for the past, I have to add back, see, when you get as old as I am, you added decades, okay? So 3 or 4 decades ago, I made a pledge of nonviolence. I haven't broken it yet. Don't ask me the wrong question, because I can go off on you. Okay, I'm going to actually try to answer shorter than I've been, but these are very provocative questions, so I commend you on your questions.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How does your work contribute to, or affect people and contribute to the community, or in your case, the world?
Well, let's take 2 examples, one here in Portland and one in Sri Lanka. by having people think about themselves differently and think about the other differently, what I've been able to do is stop incidents from happening before they happen, okay? So I was working with, I'll give you an example here in Portland. So I was working with a group of road workers, and these are all like really blue-collar guys. They all drive pickup trucks, and they all had gun racks with the guns in them, okay? And they were talking to me about how they see the world and where they see things as not being safe, etc. And I was saying, if you are in a situation where you're perceiving someone as being the other, switch whatever it is. If you see they're other because of gender, act like they're a man or a woman. If you're seeing that they're other because of the color of their skin, act like they're the same color as you and they're acting the way they are. And see if you feel threatened then. So, yeah, we went on and did some more work. And this is right around the time of the Rodney King explosions around the country. So things were very tense. And so this one white road worker was saying to me that he was driving through northeast Portland, and a carload of young black men pulled up behind him at a stoplight. And so he started to reach underneath his seat where he keeps a loaded .45. And this is just to protect himself, just to be secure. So he started reaching under his seat, and he said to me, he says, I remembered you, and I remembered your training. And I said, if that was a carload of white teenagers, would I be reaching for my gun right now? And he said, I didn't reach for the gun, I left it where it was. So they drive on a couple more blocks, and they stopped for another light, and this time, instead of the car being behind him, the car pulled up beside him. The passenger rolled down their window, pointed an object at him, and pulled the trigger on that object, which was a water gun. And doused him really good, laughed, and sped off. And he sat there for a long time, and he said, I was shook. He said, if the gun had been on my lap, I would have fired first. You know, and Portland would have had the most horrible of the incidents that came out of the Rodney King events. And I thought two things about that when he told me this. My first thought was, I don't charge the city of Portland enough for my work. That was worth about $1 million, okay? But my serious thought was, you never ever know where this work is going to show up. You know, I'm doing I'm doing the trainings in a work setting, but here it shows up and this guy's just driving down the neighborhood. I've had other people say, you know, because of the work that you're doing in a workplace setting, of having us engage with the other, I'm paying more attention to my neighbors now, you know, and all of these things make the world a better place, make the world a more secure place, make the world a more peaceful place. I've got maybe another couple hundred of those examples, but I don't know how much time you got. I don't know how much time I've got.
Who takes these classes, these sessions?
It depends on, I offer them to anybody, but it depends on if there's a business or, in this case, a governmental organization that sees a need for their workplace to come together. So in this particular case, this was the Portland's Bureau of Maintenance. I worked with the Traffic Bureau, Water Bureau, bunch of other bureaus, and then with the Oregon State, certain Oregon State agencies. I should be doing more work in the school systems, but I don't for some reason, and I don't know why. Yeah. Maybe y'all are just so peaceful. That's right.
Sure.
Yeah.
You said that your work was also global, so we have an example of between two people do the same work. another country?
I do, I mean, it's all the same work of trying to get people to understand nonviolence, understand inclusivity, understand how they are connected to the other. It looks very, very different in other countries, because a lot of times, I'm like for example in Sri Lanka, I was actually in a war zone, where talking to the various sides meant I had to cross a border that cross a minefield monitored by the International Red Cross, and get searched more times. It's kind of like just I have an open book policy on how on getting searched, and one of the things that struck me I could go a couple of hours just in my work in Sri Lanka, but one of the things that struck me, I was talking to, the Sri Lankan conflict was and is between the south, which is largely Buddhist and Sinhalese, they speak the language of Sinhala, and the Tamils in the north, who are largely Hindu, and they speak Tamil, okay? So I'm talking to a Sinhalese farmer, and he says, well, I support this war because those Tamils are keeping us poor, and you can see I'm a poor man, and it's the Tamils that's taking everything away from me. So the next day I cross the border, and I'm talking to a Tamil farmer. He says, well, I support this war because it's those Sinhalese farmers that are keeping us poor. You see how poor I am, and it's their fault. And so they buy into the story of their leadership, and the story is, you're facing bad conditions right now, and the bad conditions are created by these people over here. It's true they're facing bad conditions. It is not true that these conditions are created by these people over here. But that's how you have wars going. Oh shoot. So one of the things that I do in Sri Lanka is something that's called, I can't even pick which one would be most interesting for you. Okay, I'll do both of them. How about that? So one is called Village to Village, Heart to Heart. The other one is called an Emotional Shramadana. Okay, so the Village to Village, Heart to Heart is where the organization I work with in Sri Lanka called Sarvodaya. We literally pick up an entire village, let's say a Tamil village, and we bus them to a Sinhalese village. And we have them actually work in and for that Sinhalese village. Now, these two groups of people can't talk to each other. They don't speak the same language. What we find is that when you mix them together, it doesn't matter. After a while, people are doing sign language, or they're trying to, they're making food together, and the foods are very different, and so they're having this really wonderful time with people that just a few hours before they were afraid of, okay? And then we pick that village up, the Sinhalese village up, and take them to the Tamil village, and they do work together. Okay, that's village to village, heart to heart. Then the emotional Shramadana, the word Shramadana means shared labor, okay? And in the emotional Shramadana, what we do is, if we have a mixed village, let's say that has Sinhalese, Tamils, and Muslims in the same village, we have them go through an exercise where they will stand up if, and we start off really simple. If you have children, stand up. If you have more than 5 children, stand up. If you have a cow, stand up. And then we get heavier and heavier into, if you've lost a loved one in this conflict, stand up. Now, each group thinks they're the only ones that ever suffered loss. So when everybody stands up, then we begin to see that this is a very different kind of a conflict, and we can share the burden of each other's emotions. And again, it brings us closer together. And I'm giving myself credit for how I stopped myself from going on and on about that. Yes.
What time do you need to leave?
I'm factoring in traffic now. 4:25, then I can blast out of here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What challenges or risks have you faced through what you're doing?
People pointing guns at you, getting stuck in the middle of a minefield, being in an artillery barrage, beach shelling. I mean, is that the kind of stuff you're talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. The beaches in Sri Lanka are high security areas, and so they don't allow, actually gorgeous beaches, okay, and they don't allow the Sri Lankans to be on the beach. So I can get permission to go on the beach, and so I have, it's like having, you know, Miami Beach just to yourself. You know, you look in this direction and that direction for like 5 or 10 miles, and there's nobody there. That's the good part. The bad part is that sometimes the Tamil Tigers and the government would have artillery battles, and actually the Tamil Tigers had a navy, and so their naval forces and the Sri Lankan Army's naval forces would go after each other. And my hotel room is shaking from the explosions, and it's kind of like, this is interesting, but it's part of the job, you know. If you are afraid of losing your life, you're in the wrong business doing peace work. You don't, if you can be threatened by a threat to your life, then this isn't the work for you. This is when Martin Luther King was doing his work, and some very, very seriously deranged person killed the children in the church in Birmingham. Think of how many of us would have stopped the campaign. Oh my God, they're killing children now. We can't go forward. And they went forward, you know. And if they had stopped, think about what kind of America we would be living in right now. You know, so yeah, there are times when you have to recognize that your ultimate freedom is freedom from being terrorized. And that ultimate freedom is, once you let go of, I don't want to say let go of your life, but let go of the idea that your life has to go on forever and ever. If y'all think you're going to live forever and ever, we have to have a different conversation. Okay? But yeah, what you have to do is let that go. And once you do, you're going to find some very deep power. Having said that, my last time in Sri Lanka, I was seriously terrorized. I had a death squad pay me a visit. And that, it took me at least a half an hour to recognize I'm not going to be terrorized by this. For that half an hour, it's like, where is my plane ticket? I am leaving tonight. I am getting out of here tonight, you know. And I recognized that if I did, they win. Then I said, I have my own apartment in Sri Lanka, and it's about 5 blocks or so from the headquarters. I said, I'm going to move back onto the headquarters grounds, which they have a gate and they have security and stuff like that. And I said, if I give up my apartment, I've been terrorized, you know. And so I said, I'm gonna stay, and I did, and I'm happy that I did. But this isn't easy stuff, you know. Here in Portland, when I do the work, no one's going to hold a gun on me, but they will hurt my feelings. They'll say things, you know. And so, which one is worse? I don't know. I've never been blown up, so I can't really say.
So what motivated you to dedicate your life to this issue?
Okay, Another good question.
Is it short?
Yeah, I'm gonna try to give you a short answer. The first motivation was being born in America. If you're paying attention, then you would be doing this work. And if you're not doing this work, you're not paying attention, okay? Having been born in Camden, New Jersey, the worst city in America, we're certified, and having been raised in the worst conditions in the worst city in America, on welfare, in public housing, when National Public Radio went looking for the worst high school in America, they went to my alma mater. It makes you proud, you know? It's like, you know, we weren't half bad, okay? We were all the way bad. And the thing that did for me is that people can't lie to me. People can't lie to me and tell me how wonderful everything is, you know? I just tell them, go to Camden, go to 3rd and Line Street. I just arbitrarily, just an intersection. Walk 10 blocks. If you can do that, I'll take back all my words. If you wind up dead, I'll come to your funeral. Yeah, you know. It's like, so we talk about all the bad things that happen over in Iraq or Afghanistan or someplace other than where we are right now. So that's, to me, the motivation for that level of work. And I guess there's another level of motivation, and that is a spiritual motivation. Regardless of what your religion is, I believe that all of them say the same thing. All of them have a central message of inclusivity, which means we ignore all of them. You know, we kind of go through the motions, we go through the rituals, we show up on Sunday or Saturday or Friday, okay? But we don't actually live our lives as though it's important to treat other beings the way that we ourselves want to be treated. And I happen to think it's important. So. I'm so proud of my, actually I want this tape. This is the shortest I've been on anything.
Last one. If you can nominate anybody else for this prize, who would it be and why?
I was going to say almost all of my examples would be from other countries, okay? A lot of my examples would be people who had already passed on. And I'll give you a couple of names, and then I'll tell you someone right here in Portland that I think would be an excellent person. But the other people would include people like Vamala Thakar, Václav Havel, who is the president of the Czech Republic, and also wrote the introduction to my book. I like to help little people like that. Someone who's alive right now is Aung San Suu Kyi, I'm Thich Nhat Hanh. But someone who right here in Portland is Jenny Nelson, the founder of Sisters of the Road Cafe. And Sisters has an internal philosophy of nonviolence and gentle humanism. And I just think that that is so elegant and so peaceful. And I don't know if you know, I mean, Sisters has been around for what, 30, 35 years or something like that, and has been working with what Karl Marx would call the lumpen proletariat, the poorest of the poor. Fanon would call the wretched of the earth. And I think that I am so enamored of her work that people who say they want to come and work with me I first send them to Sisters of the Road. You know, say, I want to go with you to Sri Lanka or to India or to Thailand or to wherever. And say, yeah, go down the street and work in the soup kitchen for a week, and then we'll talk. And you have no idea how many people don't come back. You know, so yeah, my destinations sound exotic. You know, I'm doing a round the world tour. Starting in July, that'll be Jerusalem, Cairo, Delhi, Ladakh, Bali, New Zealand, and then back to Portland. Everybody's, I want to go with you. I'm going to say, you have no idea. You know, I want to come back smelling like a yak. You know, some people, they go to these places and they stay in the air-conditioned hotel and they swim at the pool and they take little tours out into the bazaar to buy something, etc. And I don't do that. I want to actually experience the cultures. So I've probably I've been to 38 different countries, but I've probably experienced over 100 different cultures. Okay, and it gives you a perspective. So
We have a few cultures here at Madison.
I've noticed that. Yes, I did some work at Madison. Maybe 15, 20 years ago. You're probably going here. And yeah, and I heard something like 100 different cultures, you know, and I'm impressed that you are able to navigate all of them. And but the question then is really, how do you navigate them? Do you make the assumption that kind of the standard Western American culture is the norm and everybody else has to kind of toe the line there? What happens when you have a situation where you've got, as in Singapore, you've got 4 or 5 equally balanced cultures? What do you know, it's really easy to say, well, the one with the most money is the one that should rule, or the one with the most population is the one that should rule, or the one that has the most guns is the one that should rule. What happens when you try to say, how do we forge an identity, a super identity that is Singaporean, while still valuing all of our separate identities? Gets tricky.
What do you guys think? How does Madison balance the different cultures?
I think that, I don't know, I think that all the other cultures, like you said, I think independently though, feel they should be westernized because they live here. But I like to learn about it. We have an African American club. We have a lot of different, there could be a club. We have different things, outlets where they can go and express themselves culturally. And it would be cool to see more of that. Like,
But what happens when there's a conflict though? Okay, let's say there's a fight between a Hispanic guy and African American guy. Is that really seen as these two guys are squaring off, or these two groups are squaring off? How do you think? So it's seen as a group thing, and then how do you handle the conflict that would come from that?
You mean mediation?
Oh, people stop for mediation? That's great.
We do have a peer mediation program that a lot of these kids are a part of. It's helpful.
Well, that's from my days, mediation was either a gun or a knife, and and whoever had the bigger one was the one that generally won the mediation. You know, so having an outlet where you can talk about things like that, and to know that they're important, and not just to say, okay, well, you automatically win because of who you are.
Right.
You know.
Right.
So okay, I got 3 more minutes. Okay, 3 or 4 more minutes. So did some work out in Hood River Valley this. I need more time, okay? So just to work out in the Hood River Valley, and was talking to, and they had a lot of schisms between the Anglos and the Latinos in the area, and to the point that there was a shooting. And people thought that this was like a personal thing between these two guys, but it had ramifications for the larger community. So that's when they brought me in saying, we're going in the wrong direction here. So I started interviewing people, and among the people I started interviewing at the high school. And the high school had two separate dances. So it has dance for the Anglos, and it had a dance for Latinos, okay? And I was like, why is this the case? And when I talk to the Anglo kids, it's like, oh, they don't want to dance with us. They don't like our music. They don't like the way we dress. They don't, talk to the Latino kids. Oh, they don't like our music. They don't like how we dress. And so both of them, without talking to each other, were working on each other's stereotypes. So part of the same program was doing work down in Woodburn. And so it's Woodburn High School, which at the time was something like 60, 70% Latino. And you go in the cafeteria, all the white kids are sitting here, all the Latino kids are sitting somewhere else. And so I was talking to a group of the Latino kids, and I said, why are you sitting by yourself? Why aren't you sitting with the white kids? And says, oh, we're not isolating ourselves. They won't come over here, and they're isolating themselves. He said, this one kid says, they act like if they came over to our table, we'd kick their ass or something. And I said, okay, well, what would happen if that kid right over there came and sat down at your table? He thought for a few days and said, well, kick his ass. Yeah, so there was a lot of work to be done all around, okay? But most of the work really involved getting people to actually talk directly to each other. I'm in favor of ethnic clubs or things like that, as long as there is a way to bring them together. Because and this is true when I was going to college. I thought our group, the Black American, first law students when I went to law school, but also in undergraduate school, I thought they got dysfunctional after a while because of the isolation. After a while, it was like, I don't want to talk to them, and I think that that's a serious mistake. So.
Well, I know you need to leave.
I gotta go. Okay, bye.
In your most recent email, you said some stuff may have shifted. You might be able to come to the
I'll let you know. I'll be able to let you know that in my